My favorite interviews with one of my favorite preachers. And as we close 2022, I thought it would be fun to replay this interview with one of my favorite people, Pastor Andy Stanley.
What you give away multiplies. It just does. What you cling to diminishes. I mean, a guy unhitched from the Old Testament, how can you even speak to him?
Right.
In fact, yeah. So how is it that we're still friends?
Welcome to this episode of the Happy Rabbi and Friends. Today, I am interviewing Andy Stanley, and super excited to be able to do this. Thank you for being willing to do this. I sure appreciate you.
Your bribe worked, so.
So I don't know if people, what context they know you from, or if they know you. I think sometimes if somebody doesn't know your name, I say, he's Charles Stanley's son. And they're like, oh, I love that guy. So it depends on people's ages, right? If they're
totally.
So you're son of a pastor and a pastor yourself. Grew up in Baptist church.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you consider yourself now?
People just call us non-denominational, so I don't ever really use that title, but that's, just a differentiator. And we started the church, we were going to be Baptist, but I realized we had virtually nothing in common with any of the Baptist churches in our area, and our elders voted, and they were all Southern Baptists, except for one guy was Brethren, our original elders, and they were like, yeah, if it's going to get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish, if it's an obstacle in the Southeast, let's ditch it and just do our own thing. And I thought I was going to have to talk them into it. They're like, nope, our mission is to inspire people to follow Jesus. So anything that's an obstacle, let's drop it and move on. So we did.
Was your dad a part of you choosing to become a pastor? Was it an expectation?
Nope, not at all. My parents were like, hey, you do what you feel like God wants you to do, and we'll back you up.
So why did you become a pastor?
I volunteered in our church, and I worked in the media department when I was in college. And second year of college, I asked my dad, I said, hey, do you have to be called into ministry, or can you just volunteer? And he said, I think you can just volunteer. I said, well, I would like to volunteer for ministry. And that was my big, lightning bolt, non-lightning bolt moment. And I just loved the local church and what local church was about. And even as a teenager, I never really rebelled or anything. And I just have loved church. So, and I didn't want to be a pastor. I just wanted to be somehow involved in church. So I did student ministry for 10 years working for him. Then I heard a guy speak one time, and it was so amazing at our church. And I walked up, I said, where did you learn that? And he said, Dallas Theological Seminary. And I'm like, well, then I want to go there and figure out and learn what, I want to know what the people who wrote the commentaries knew. Like, how do you know what's behind the stuff?
Right.
So I went to DTS and did all the Greek and Hebrew, and worked for my dad for 10 years in student ministry, and then launched North Point Community Church 26 years ago.
So I've told you before, the title's different now when two worlds collide, but your book, Choosing to Cheat, I think I heard you speak on it at the Global Leadership Summit.
Yeah, years and years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 20 years ago.
Could be.
And then read it and was super inspired. And then I recently just reread it. So where did that come from for you? The idea of you're either going to choose work or family, and you have to choose which one to cheat, which I guess I understand why the publishers wanted to change the title. Maybe
they didn't like the title and
confusing.
Well,
I liked it better. I like the original title better.
Yeah, me too. I thought if you can't sell a book entitled "Choosing to Cheat," you should be in publishing. I mean, what a great title, right? So they eventually changed the title to "When Work and Family Collide," which is a terrible title. But as an author, you don't have as much control as people think.
Right.
So where it came from is I kind of got tired of listening to people talk about work-life balance. And I just thought, I mean, I had 3 little kids. I'm like, there's no balance. There is not enough time to get everything done. I don't care how spiritual you are and how well you manage your time. There are just some things that are not going to get done, or not get done as well as they could if that's all you had to do.
Right.
So I just said, work-life balance. That's not what it is. It really comes down to something's got to give. Somebody's going to get cheated or feel cheated. And it's going to be the folks at work in my organization, my job, or the folks at home. And so I decided, you know what? When it comes down to that, I'm going to work hard. I've got a strong work ethic, but I'm not going to cheat my family, because my only unique role is at home, not at work. I mean, somebody's going to be the lead pastor at this church someday and run this thing. But my kids, my only unique role is really Sandra's first husband and my kids' father. So why would I cheat in the arena where somebody else is not only can do what I'm doing, they are going to do what I'm doing? Why would I cheat the thing that is unique to me? So that's where the idea came from. And, it's a strong word, cheat, but hey, it because I wrote the book and tried to model that, it really defined our culture, our organizational culture. So that's been kind of cool.
Yeah. And then is it still working 20 years later?
Yes. The other way though, I say this all the time, the church, because I've been at the same, I started church we started church 26 years ago. I work all the time. We're empty nesters. I don't have any hobbies. I don't play golf. I don't collect anything. I don't fish. I don't hunt. I'm the ideal husband. That's Sandra just walked by. That's why I said that. That's what I tell her. And she's like, get a hobby. No, I'm just kidding. So honestly, I work all the time. So my point is, I feel like the church is getting back all those hours that I technically cheated. It's all coming back around. And when I say cheated, I just meant, and in the book, I tell this story where this came to a head is, we had 2 in diapers and Sandra's pregnant, and I get home in the afternoon, like normal people time. And she's like, I'm exhausted. I just don't know. And I said, honey, what would be the ideal schedule? And she said, you know what, if you could be home at 4:00, it would change everything. I'm like, I'll do it. So I just started meeting people super early. I'd have 2 breakfasts, because she didn't care what time I left in the morning. It's like the afternoon, that energy drain, So, and we had just started the church. And this is when, the captain needs to be the last one to leave the ship. And I was leaving the office, and and it was only 5 of us, but I was the first person to leave the office in the afternoon, which felt terrible as the leader. I should be there the latest. I had no late afternoon meetings. I had no dinners. I went to 1 meeting at night. That was our elders meeting once a month. And then we had our small group that she and I did together. And I just said, no afternoon meetings, no evening meetings. And which meant I said no to a lot of things and missed a lot of things, but I didn't miss my family. And of course, I don't regret that for a minute. So I would tell people, my assistant, her name was Lisa at the time. We had an assistant between 3 of us. And she would say, yes, Andy can meet you. He can meet at 5. He can meet at 6. No, AM. He'll meet you as early as you want to meet. But no, he can't have lunch with you. I had no lunches because I just worked straight through, going to get my hours in. No lunches, no coffees in the afternoon, no dinners. Really, Matt, for like 10 years. And I did not leave the city to travel and speak. I'd got invited to do cool stuff. I'm like, nope, just categorically, no. It's not that I don't have to look at my calendar. It's a categorical no. And the way Sandra would talk about that with moms is you have to say no for now, but not forever. No for now, but not forever. No for now, because in this season, these aren't bad things, but in this season, it's no for now, but not forever. So those are some of the things we learned. We stuck with it. And, I don't regret it. So, and the church survived. And in the book, I even say, and I don't recommend this. So don't model this. This is just what I did in my desperate moment. My prayer was, Lord, I think I can only give you in this church 40 hours a week. So you build as big a church as you can on my 40 hours a week, but I'm not going to cheat my family for ministry. And I've seen too many other pastors do that as well. And my dad did not do that. My dad, in his own way, modeled this for me and my sister. So it wasn't like I was reacting to a distant father. That is, people often think that, oh, this is because I'm like, no, what I saw modeled at home actually was what I think gave me the courage to model this early on when we started the church.
Wow. Yeah, one of the things in the book that I thought was really great was the people's, you phrase it like people think they have the ability to tell the future. So it's like, but if I do that, if I do what you're telling me to do, then I'll get fired.
No,
And it's like, but you
or
can't
my career won't
tell
take
the
off,
future.
or and only God knows the future, right? Yeah, there are plenty of other things that will undermine your career or your finances other than trying to prioritize your life correctly. And what happens is, Matt, and you've seen this, people get in a cycle where they don't enjoy work because they feel guilty because they're not home. And then they don't really enjoy being at home because it's not pleasant, because they've created something unpleasant and they would rather be at work. And you find your heart gravitate. Well, our hearts gravitate toward acceptance. And, I'm the boss. Everybody's nice and kind to me, they laugh at all my jokes. I mean, anything I think is funny, they just laugh, because I'm the boss. So that's an attractive environment to be, where you're like, the guy, right? Well, you do that to the neglect of family. And again, our hearts gravitate toward acceptance. So we create our own problem if we're not careful. So I've seen that and I've tried to avoid that.
Okay. So I feel like I have this gut feeling that there's people in the Messianic Jewish world that are hoping that we're doing this interview so I can correct you, by the way.
Please. Yes, they are.
And people have said to me, if our relationship comes up, they're like, "What? Well, have you told him?"
Yeah. I mean, the guy unhitched from the Old Testament. How can you even speak to him?
Oh, right.
In fact, yeah. So how is it that we're still friends?
Which, did you ever actually say that?
What?
Tell people that they should unhitch from the Old Testament?
Well, I told our church within the context of Acts 15, teasing out my next series, which was my favorite series, The Bible for Grown-ups. I talked about unhitching from the Old Testament, but it was within the context of Acts 15, where the Jewish community, they're arguing about the Gentiles have to, be 100% Torah observers before they can be Christians. And so this was so emotional. You understand this better than I do. Yeah. So emotional. So there was a severing, not of Judeans and Galileans from Torah, but giving people like me permission to follow Messiah without embracing all of Torah. So there was a unhitching, but people hated that word and took it out of context. But yes, I used that word, and anyway. But I read the Bible every day, and I teach.
Do you like the Bible?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. These are questions people ask who never listen to me preach and think, right. But maybe I deserve a little bit, but honestly, I don't. People, the people in our churches, they hear things in context. The people who already kind of don't like me are kind of waiting to dive bomb and say, aha. And that's just part of life. And we're all going to get to heaven. We'll sort it out then. But yeah. Right. And while I have your audience to brag on I have learned so much from you, and this, and that I've every once in a while ask a question: how do I say this? What's the best way to say this? Our discussion on the oral Torah was so helpful to me, especially in understanding how that was woven into first century Judaism and how Jesus responded to it. So this has been a very beneficial conversation. I mean, a relationship to me. So I just want your audience to know that. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think it's a value for me. I know it is for you too, that I don't understand how people can only maintain relationships with people they agree with on every issue, because I don't even agree with myself all the time.
Well, we change. That means that I wouldn't be friends with me 15 years ago, right? Right. It's like, who's that guy? Oh, that's totally. Me. Or that's me 20 years ago. I hate that guy. I mean, isn't that part of getting older and growing up, and we become less sure about most things and more sure about the things that really matter. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wrote a book called Jesus Never Said Anything New. You wrote a book called Irresistible: The New Jesus Unleashed, which are obviously different. And it's funny because I think actually we disagree on some of the ways of what gets to the conclusion, but your conclusion of your book, which is the question, what does love require of you? Which I think is such a great way to kind of restate love your neighbor as yourself. Is the part we, certainly agree on. So what's the driving principle behind that question for you? What does love require?
So when I teach the what does love require of me, I say, there's the golden rule, but Jesus introduced the platinum rule. And of course, this is just language that we've created. It's not biblical in terms of golden rule. So the golden rule is, hey, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or do no harm to anyone because you don't want them to harm you. But the platinum rule, Jesus said, the new command I'm giving you is you're to love one another. That wasn't new, but he wasn't through. The new command is you're to love one another the way that I have loved you. So in other words, we don't get to define it. We don't get to decide what it looks like. And then the next day, of course, he puts on a demonstration of love that takes his breath away, takes their breath away, and then took all of our sin away. And then, in that same moment when he gives the new command, he washes their feet. And, this wasn't just an oversight like, hey, we should have had a servant do this. This was his way of saying, this is what this looks like. This looks like getting on your knees in front of people who you have disagreements with, because even in that room, there was different disagreements among those guys. So when I say, what does love require of me? I don't mean, let's think loving thoughts and do unto others. No, it's way bigger than that. It's tied to Jesus saying, I want you to do for others what I have done for you. And for the guys in the room that night, he could have gone around. Matthew, you remember, not Mark, Matthew, you remember, James, you remember, John, you remember, Peter, there were specific moments where he loved them remarkably well. And he was saying, this is what you're to look like. And then for some reason, the church just cannot seem to remember this. And I'm probably as guilty. By this, all people will know that you're my disciples, not if you do unto others as you would have them do. No, that you would love the way that I have loved you. So he raises the bar. And then the Apostle Paul comes along and says, let me tell you what he says to the Gentile world. Here's what it looks like. 1 Corinthians 13, all those things about love, all the one another passages. From my perspective, why I understand it, all the one another passages are just applications of Jesus' new command. So that's what that looks like to me.
The misunderstanding of the Torah for most Christians and the way Judaism relates to Torah is that Christians believe that Jews believe that keeping the commandments saves us. But actually, the only reason
I don't believe that. I don't.
But a lot do.
Yeah, Christians, yeah, because of the way they take what the Apostle Paul and they don't understand the context in which he's speaking. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
The only reason to keep commandments has nothing to do with our salvation. It has everything to do with God loving us first. So because he loved us first, as an expression of love back to him, it's obedience. We do what he commands us to do. The struggle in the New Testament, in the first century, it's the reverse of how we look at it today. People ask me all the time, how can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? The question for the apostles in Acts 15 was, how can someone be a Gentile and believe in Jesus? Right? So there's like this turnover of the world kind of flips it around in 2,000 years later. But the intent was, how do we open the doors to, as part of God's design back to Abraham, the whole reason for blessing Abraham was so that his descendants would be a blessing to the nations. The blessing that the Jewish people are to the nations is to preach the gospel to the nations, which any Gentile who believes in Jesus believes because of the eyewitness of Jewish people, because of their telling of what actually happened. So the principle is, love one another as I have loved you, goes back to Leviticus 19 is where love your neighbor as yourself comes from. And the whole context of the verses around it are about how you treat each other and how you deal with conflict and how you deal with in the commandments. So when those things are quoted, they're quoting it back in a context that was already, well, of course we're supposed to love each other the way God loves us. But I also understand the practical. They literally followed God as a man for 3 years, and he demonstrated it to them in a way that was not demonstrated
but
before.
To your point, he was demonstrating how God loves. In other words, it's like
Totally
when Philip says, hey, look, Jesus, we're not really following you here. Just show us the Father. And instead of, I don't mean this in any other way than Jesus meant it, but when he said, show us the Father, Jesus says, well, look at me, because this is as good as it gets. I'm God in a bod, right? I'm the Word.
Right here.
I'm in the incarnate Word. Okay. If you look past me, you're missing it. If you stop short of me, you're missing it. I am the living Word. And so as Jesus loved, it's a reflection of how God loves, but it's the image, it's the application in ways that we can't miss, because it's a person who's demonstrating actual physical hands-on grace. The John 8, where he says to the people who were going to stone the woman who committed adultery, instead of pointing out the systemic problems, he just says, okay, well, let's go for it. Those of you, if you are without sin, do it. So he shames them by pointing out their hypocrisy, but then he turns to her and says, okay, now your turn. Leave your life of sin. This is what God's love looks like. It's protective and it's confrontational, and you don't have to try to sort it out from the history of your people. Here it is right in front of you, and it's so powerful, and it is so consistent.
It is. And what's interesting about that kind of situation,
it's almost as if Jesus never said anything new, if you think about it.
Yes.
Almost. And it's irresistible. It's irresistibly
at the same
not
time.
new. We should write a book together. Irresistibly not new.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
it'll probably sell better with your name on it than mine.
To some people,
Maybe
but not
2%.
to others.
Yeah. What's interesting is that whole context of the woman, the question that they have for him is they present her and say, she was found in committing adultery. Well, the problem is when you go back to the Torah, there's very clear commandments of when two people are found committing adultery, you bring them both before.
Yeah.
So
where's the guy?
How is she caught by herself in adultery?
That guy just got out. He escaped. He ran off. They couldn't find him anywhere.
So part of the context of what's happening is those rabbis were not following the actual commandment, which is bring both. And I think it's because it was either one of them or several of them.
Yeah. Or that too many of them knew her. Yeah.
Right.
If she starts talking, we're all toast, right?
So when he says, whoever is without sin cast the first stone, I don't think he's saying it as a general, anybody who's ever sinned. I think he's saying to them,
it's very contextual.
You either know who the man is, or it's several of you, and whoever hasn't slept with her, or whoever is, doesn't or knows who the man is and isn't fessing up to it, because you're supposed to not condemn anyone without 2 or 3 witnesses.
Yeah. Well,
so
also
cast the first stone.
Also in the way it was handled in the first century, we know for stoning, the person who was bringing the accusation and was willing to put their name on the line was the first one to throw a stone. So it's like, okay, which one of you is willing to sign your name to her death sentence? And it's like, I'm not going to go first. So
which my dad always says, my dad thinks when he writes in the, we don't know what he wrote in the sand. My dad thinks what he wrote in the sand is, where is the man?
Yeah. It's fun.
Question mark.
It's fun to decide what Jesus wrote in the sand. I think I think he wrote. Have you heard me I think he wrote, it takes one to know one. Yeah, that's what I think you did. That's what, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So one of my favorite things you said, I have your quote. Somebody said to me recently, I have several of your quotes all over my office. And somebody just recently said to me, who is this Andy Stanley guy? Because you mentioned him a lot. So this is him. Is I don't feel like it's my responsibility to fill anybody's cup, but I'm responsible to empty mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I like to teach leaders and leadership, and then, just preaching and teaching in general. And this is just my little way of saying, look, I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the answers you need today. So I'm going to take what I have, my responsibility. In fact, I think everybody's responsibility, every parent's responsibility, grandparent, our responsibility is to take what we know, pour it into the cup of the next generation, and acknowledge, look, I'm not trying to fill it up. Don't walk away from here going, oh, that's not enough. I'm telling you up front, it's not enough. It's all I got. Now you need to go find somebody else and get the rest of your cup full. But my responsibility is to, when I leave this life, to have poured out as much of myself and as much of what I know into my kids, hopefully one day grandkids, the staff, the people I have influence in. So it's kind of like, here's what I got, and then, go find the rest somewhere else. This may not be relevant, but one of the misconceptions about discipleship is I'm not a fan of one-on-one discipleship. And I'm not a fan of, hey, I'm going to be your discipler and you just come sit at my feet forever and ever. No, I'm a fan of, okay, I'm going to give you what I got, and you're going to have to go find some other people to give you the rest of it, which is a safer model for discipleship. People become less codependent. And the person that feels like I'm the guru, just come, I've got what you need. That's generally somebody who's trying to control people or develop an unhealthy shepherding thing. And we've all seen that go the wrong way. So that's kind of where that phrase came from. And I don't know that it's even original with me. I may have heard somebody else say that. As is the case with most things that I say.
That happens a lot with my mom, actually. I'll say, well, Andy says, and she'll say, he's not the first one to say that.
Yeah, well, she is correct.
No,
yeah,
that's true. I heard it was Catalyst in Dallas, and John Maxwell spoke probably 12 years ago. And then you interviewed him afterwards. And I had never seen, I feel like it was demonstrated. I mean, he's an amazing speaker, but the interview that followed gave weight to everything he said. Because I remember he said something along the lines of, if you're the CEO or the leader of an organization, it's yours and it belongs to you. But the longer you hold on to it, the less you have to give away.
I remember that, yeah.
And then you said, you guys don't understand that John did that. And then he said a thing about everyone's afraid that they'll lose their voice in the next generation. Mm-hmm. That the way to keep your voice in the next generation is to share your platform. And then you said, he's not just saying that, it's what he did with me.
Yep.
And that John has been and still will always be a voice in your life because he shared his platform. And I just, I don't know that I'd ever really, I feel like in some of the things I grew up in, everybody's fighting for the platform. Yep. I've heard it said that to me, we're not gonna pass the baton, but we're gonna share it, which of course is not how batons work.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not if you're gonna share it, you're gonna lose that race, right?
Right. I've never seen a race where two people are holding the baton at the same time and running together.
Yeah.
So
and John has done that and continues in some ways to do that, even with me all these years later. And it really has. I'm glad you brought this up because I haven't thought about it. It really did model, because I wish I could quote him exactly. I have that quote written down somewhere because it's something he had actually said to me in private, and I think I brought it up in the interview because it was so powerful.
Right.
But it's essentially this idea of what you give away multiplies. It just does. What you cling to diminishes 100% of the time. Live for yourself. You only have yourself to show for yourself, right? So to multiply our influence is to share what we can share. And in his case, he shared his platform. In his case, he shared his reputation by giving me and others opportunities to stand on his shoulders, to do something for the next generation. And now it's my responsibility to do that same thing. And I hope I'm doing a good job with that, with our other pastors or other church leaders and, whatever platform. In fact, one of my goals early on was to get all of my direct reports published. I wanted to help all of them write a book. So I co-wrote several books with several of my employees who then went on to do other things. And I didn't get all of them published. Some of them were just like, I'm just not a writer. I just don't know that I have, unique content, excuse me. So I have loved helping, again, because I'm a writer. So that's one of my platforms. So I can just hang on to that or say, hey, what can I do to help get other people published? So yeah, it's
right.
And it's just a better way to live, right? And
yeah,
in fact, one of our staff behaviors is remain open-handed. And I say, you got to remain open-handed with your opportunities, with what comes your way. God can put more in open hand than closed hands. And as soon as I start saying my church, my people, my reputation, my brand, my, I just become a smaller person. And you and I have seen that happen with people in ministry, and it is ugly. It does not end well. And once you close your hands to a certain degree, you can't really get them back open because this is what people remember. It's hard to go back. And so I hope that in that regard, whatever legacy I have, I don't really think about legacy. I just think about getting ready for Sunday, honestly. I hope it's that open-handed. And I saw that.
Yeah.
John really did model that and continues to model that.
I've also heard you say getting the word loyalty out of your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like you don't want people to be loyal to you or to your
what
ministry.
I say is loyalty didn't even make it as a fruit of the Spirit, right? It's so low down on the list.
Right.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control. But what about loyalty? It's not that important. And it's not, right? I mean, there is, in terms of asking someone to be loyal to me, you earn loyalty, like you earn respect. You can demand respect, but who knows if it's real. You can demand loyalty, but if somebody has to sign a contract, that's not loyalty, that's manipulation. So, but in Christian circles, unfortunately, this honor, it's called honor culture, or it's a phrase sometimes, honor culture, but what it really can become, not always, it can become, no, I'm demanding loyalty. You're either in or you're out. You're for me or you're against me. And I'm like, I don't want to work in that. And I don't want to accidentally or purposely create that on our staff.
Do you do anything with people who accuse you of not preaching the gospel, or you don't preach about sin enough, or it's too watered down, or?
Honestly, I'll show you. So I don't know.
Or the best one is what about when people say to you,
can you see
what
it's
does your
backwards?
dad think?
Yeah, see where it says backward? It's backwards. It says
Andy haters.
Yeah,
yes.
These are the tweets I have saved of all the best Andy hater tweets because I save them for my kids, and they're just great. And then here's one: Andy Stanley, you can sit down with all the lukewarm, effeminate magazines you want, brother. Know this: the Lord reads the heart, and you will stand before Him. You are to publicly repent of your heretical teaching. I forgive you, but you need to renounce your heresies. Anyway, so I read these to my kids, and they're like, who are they talking about? I'm like, your father. And if they follow me on Twitter, because it's always Twitter, if they follow me on Twitter, I direct message them back and try to start a conversation. So they generally don't follow me, so I can't even respond. But if they do, I respond. I send them free stuff. I say, I'm always positive because I'm a Christian, right? I mean, we're supposed to be at peace with people. As far as it depends on me, I'm to make peace with all people. Right. So every once in a while, it's a helpful conversation. Other times it goes nowhere.
About the dad thing, right? When people are like, but what does your dad think of what you're doing?
Oh, yeah. I know that. Well, those
Like,
people don't
they're
follow me.
assuming he disagrees with you.
I've got some about the apples falling so far from the tree, and Dr. Stanley must be ashamed of Andy. I'm like, no, I read these tweets to him too. We just kind of roll with it, you know. He had his share of, you know, criticism through the years. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending some time and doing this. I really appreciate you, and am glad that we connected and continue to build a relationship.
Well, do people know, I know you got to go and I do too, but I just think it's so great that you reached out to me through a friend years ago, and Irresistible came out, and you had some problems, you had some questions, some objections. And I was like, yeah, I love to talk to people who disagree. That's the only time I ever learn anything, right? If you just follow people you agree with, it's an echo chamber. You don't learn anything. So I thought, oh, good. Here's an educated, smart, you know, son of a rabbi who's going to, you know, interface with me over continuity is kind of a theological term, right? Continuity, old and new, you know?
Yeah.
And I liked you immediately. I went home and told Sarah, she was like, how did that go? I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I made a friend. And this has been mutually beneficial, and I'm very, very grateful. And I appreciate you sharing, doing what John Maxwell did. You kind of allowed me to hijack your platform, and I appreciate it, and hope we can do it again sometime. To those of you who are watching, and thank you for being a part of what this amazing guy's doing for the world. So